Welcome to You're Not Broken, Just Rewiring, a free audiobook podcast by me, Glenn Ostlund. Preface. Is it just me, or do you sometimes feel like a really cool bear claw pendant, buried deep beneath layers of dirt in an archaeological excavation, just waiting to be uncovered? I don't mean that solely as a metaphor, although I do mean it mostly as a metaphor. Sorry, Mom. When I shared an early draft of this book with my mom, she said I might be using too many metaphors. She's not wrong. But metaphors help me see things in a different way. And honestly, seeing things differently is kind of the whole point of this book. So, just for a little while, just for fun, I'd like to invite you to look at yourself from a different perspective. Not a false one, a real one. Just different from what you might be used to. Not the usual story of who you are, your roles, your responsibilities, but from the perspective of your nervous system, an ancient, intelligent system still living and adapting within you. What if your oldest ancestor wasn't a person, but a cell? What if the real you began 4 billion years ago as a single living thread of intelligence? Or 700 million years ago as a flicker of awareness in the first cluster of neurons? What if you're not a single self, but a community of trillions of cells, each one shaped by evolution to survive, adapt, and thrive together? What if your anxiety, your compulsions, your shutdowns, or outbursts aren't signs of failure, but signals? The ancient language of your nervous system trying to bring you back to balance. That's how I've come to see it, and that's what this book explores. I'm not writing as a neuroscientist or a guru, but as a soul-centered, trauma-informed clinical therapist who spent a year interning with court-mandated domestic violence offenders. We used a neuroscience-based brain change curriculum, and that experience changed me. Working with those men, hearing their stories, witnessing their pain, watching the internal walls they'd built for survival, showed me how our nervous systems are constantly adapting, often without conscious permission. What looks like brokenness is often brilliance in disguise, coping strategies shaped under pressure, long before understanding was possible. That's not an excuse. It's a frame, a way of seeing. Because thriving starts with how we see. And what I saw in them is what I hope you'll begin to see in yourself. Not a problem to be solved, but a process unfolding. Not a flaw to be fixed, but a system trying, always, to return to coherence. I've learned to meet that process with what Carl Rogers calls unconditional positive regard. It's a posture also echoed in many wisdom traditions. Maitri in Buddhism, Chesed in Judaism, Agape in Christian thought, Ubuntu in Southern African philosophy. Different names for the same stance, a deep recognition of worth that exists beneath behavior, a willingness to stay present with the parts that hurt. That's what I try to hold when I sit with clients, and that's what I hope to hold for you as a reader, too. All of my own identities, therapist, life coach, podcaster, former academic, imperfect dad, wandering soul, have shaped how I think about thriving. They inform the metaphors I reach for. They color the language I use. And they've helped me land on this. The nervous system doesn't speak in words. It speaks in patterns, in impulses, in symptoms that make us pause. And that brings me back to the bear claw. Years ago, I visited an archaeological dig at Bear Lake in southern Utah. I expected something exciting, but what I saw was slow, gentle. The archaeologists weren't digging with shovels, they were brushing away sediment with delicate, whisper-soft bristles. Swift, 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 yawn. Then they'd sift the loosened soil through a screen, searching for something tiny and precious. Hours of effort, not much reward, until one day they uncovered a Native American bear claw pendant, small, beautiful, ancient, and worth every swift. I think about that a lot. The way thriving doesn't come with shovels. The way we brush, sift, pause, repeat. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's deliberate. Because something essential is waiting beneath the surface. Not to be corrected, but uncovered, appreciated, loved for exactly what it is, no matter how long it's been buried. Isn't that what therapy is like too? Layer after layer, habit after habit, each one shaped by lived experience, some helpful, some not, all trying to help us survive. Even the behaviors we wish we could change, the procrastination, the reactivity, the scrolling and numbing, are often signals from a system doing the best it can, not optimal, but understandable. When I can see people that way, through the lens of adaptation instead of pathology, it changes how I respond. It softens judgment. It invites curiosity. It helps me feel safer in my own system too. That doesn't mean all behavior is okay. It doesn't mean consequences disappear. But it does mean we begin from understanding, and that creates space for something new. So, that's what this book is. Not a doctrine, not a manual, a reflection, a reframe, a conversation. Between neurons, between stories, between the parts of you that want to thrive and the parts still holding on. You'll find metaphors here. Also, neuroscience, folklore, psychology, speculative ideas, a few theories, a lot of questions. Some of it is grounded in research. Some of it stretches toward possibility. Because I tend to think more in terms of function than strict form. That distinction between what something is and what it does will come up a lot in this book. So, if you feel something stir while reading or listening, pay attention. If something annoys or resonates or confuses, notice that. That's your nervous system talking. There's no wrong way to read this book. Your response is the point. Because you're not broken, you're rewiring. And somewhere beneath the surface, something beautiful is waiting to be loved. Author's note: how we got here. Sometimes life gets a little bumpy. I was 14 years old, rafting the Upper Salt River in Arizona with my Boy Scout troop when our raft flipped. Before we even reached the infamous Quartzsite Falls, a steep drop too dangerous to run, we were in the water, tumbling, disoriented, no up, no down, just current. I remember the river guide's safety talk before we got on the water. If you fall in, don't panic. Grab the rope. Hold the raft until it calms. If you're feeling brave, pull yourself up on top and ride the rapids out from there. So I tried. I grabbed. I climbed. I slipped. I went under. No breath, no bearings, no way to simply don't panic. And then that old phrase surfaced in my mind. Heavenly Father, please. A prayer I had practiced for years. And then something shifted. I stopped fighting, and the river, in its strange wisdom, carried me into an eddy, a swirling pocket of calm at the edge of chaos. I caught my breath. I reset. Eventually, I made it back. We portaged around Quartzsite Falls that day, disassembled the raft, hauled it over the rocks, rebuilt it on the other side. It took hours. But life hasn't always given me that option. When the bigger drops came later, divorce, job loss, faith crisis, I didn't get to portage. I went over and through and down, churning and churning again and again. And I'd be lying if I said I don't still feel it. This book is for anyone who's been there, in the churn, when the path disappears, when the person you thought you were no longer fits. I never planned to become a therapist, or a podcaster, or someone writing a book like this. I started out as a folklorist. I earned a Master of Arts in Folklore and Mythology, training to become a professor. I studied how stories function, not just what they say, but how they shape identity, encode survival strategies, and carry wisdom across generations. I loved teaching. I thought that would be my path forever. But the river had other plans. I left academia before finishing my PhD to explore the world. For the next 13 years, I worked in global healthcare, overseeing medical device networks across Asia, Europe, and Latin America. The company's motto was, "Always do what's best for the patient," and I loved that. But over time, I saw how the incentives didn't always align. What patients needed wasn't always what got prioritized. That gap between stated values and lived reality stayed with me. Then came another wave, the slow motion collapse of a belief system I once considered absolute. I was raised in a high-demand religious tradition, and when it stopped making sense, I lost more than just doctrine. I lost community, direction, belonging. To process, I co-created a podcast with friends called Infants on Thrones. A space to laugh, rage, grieve, and reimagine. That's where I first encountered the term cognitive distortions, a concept I'd never heard in church, but instantly recognized in my body. Catastrophizing, black or white thinking, emotional reasoning, the mental reflexes that feel like truth but function like folklore. Maybe the way I was raised impacted me more deeply than I really knew. That realization hit me like another eddy. Only later did I learn that these distortions weren't flaws. They were patterns, coping mechanisms, echoes of survival. It lit something up in me. I became a certified life coach under Alan Cohen. His metaphors worked like flashlights for the soul. His teachings didn't give me answers, but lenses. I began coaching individuals and groups, helping them reframe the stories shaping their lives. It felt like folklore again, only more personal, more alive. And my hunger grew. I wanted more structure, more rigor, more tools. So I went back to school and earned a Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling. For my internship, I worked with domestic violence offenders in a neuroscience-based brain change program, 3 nights a week, group after group, story after story. And something happened I didn't expect. I saw myself in them. Not in their actions, but in their patterns, in the unresolved trauma, the overlearned defenses, the struggle to pause and reflect before reacting. And I realized what looks like brokenness is often adaptation, an intelligent system doing what it was wired to do, with the resources that it had at the time. That insight rewired something in me, not overnight, not all at once, but enough to reshape the way I listen. Enough to inspire this book. This isn't a memoir, and it's not a manual. It's a spiral, a journey through glitch and signal, story and symptom, myth and mind. A conversation between the folklore you inherited and the nervous system that inherited you. It's a pause, a breath, a space to consider what's happening, not as failure, but as transformation, not as brokenness, but as rewiring. So, if you've ever gone over the falls, if you've ever tried to hold on but lost your grip, if you've landed in unfamiliar waters wondering who you are now, you're not alone. You're not broken. You're just rewiring. Always.